Our next speaker is a Google developer expert, the creator of Angular Athens, and she's here to teach us some really neat tricks on Google Maps. Give it up for Katherina Skroumpelou.
Okay, thank you. So I think you're all very lucky to be here today because I love maps and I will make you love them too. So I'm very glad that in the previous presentation there was a map and some things on the map because you can actually do that map with Google Maps if you want. So today, this was the original title I wanted to give to my presentation, but I thought this might create some negative energy, but I'm going to teach you this one weird trick that will make other web map library users really hate you. So who am I? I'm a software engineer at this.labs. I'm the co-founder of Angular Athens. I'm a Google developer expert for Angular, web technologies, and the Google Maps platform. I also have a project called Greasehopper.js where I try to go around remote areas in Greece and mentor people about technology. I'm also in the program committee of the Vox Days Greek conference, and I'm also a speaker, an instructor, a mentor, and a cat person, as you can see. So, what are we going to see today? We're going to see why we would want to use maps, some other options for you to use maps instead of Google Maps, but we're not going to see these in depth, the integration of Google Maps and Angular, then the code, then interaction, some cool visuals, demo, and conclusions. So why should I even add a map to my app? So maps are everywhere. I mean, think of any app you know, literally any app. It will have location-based services, it will show you a map, it will ask you where you are, it will connect you to people. Also, maps are used to show data. In the previous presentation, they showed locations of the, I don't know, the army and the dragons. So maps are actually used to show data. And your app has data which you might want to visualize on a map. Also, as I said, location-based services connect you to people around you or to businesses around you. So they want to know where you are, and they want to show you things on the map near you. And also mapping in social applications like, I don't know, Tinder or Facebook or what have you. And of course, ride-sharing apps and everything. So are there any other options apart from Google Maps? Because, I mean, Google Maps is, I think, is one of the most famous platforms. But for the web, there are also other pretty awesome libraries that you can use, of course. There is Mapbox, which is also very famous, but it has pricing. But you can do awesome things with Mapbox. Also Leaflet, it's free open source, simple to use. You have Open Layers, which is, again, is free and open source. It's quite complex, but it can handle complexity very well. Usually in the past, when I wanted to visualize a lot of data or handle very complex operations or things like GIS data, Open Layers is a pretty good way to go. Then the Google Maps JavaScript API, it has pricing. It can also handle complexity, and we're going to see this today. You have access to Google APIs. I mean, you have access to directions. You have access to all the places and everything you can see on Google Maps. And new things are added all the time, and we're going to see this today. Then you have D3, which is for data visualization, and you can use it for maps as well. Then you have the ArcGIS JavaScript API, where if you're doing GIS, you might need it, but it's enterprise software. And then you also have CartoDB, which is also great for spatial data visualization. But today, we're going to talk about the Google Maps platform and all the awesome things you can do. So give me a moment, because I forgot to add my timer. Sorry. OK. So what is the Google Maps platform? So the Google Maps platform contains all the products and the APIs that are associated with maps and geolocation Google has to offer. You have maps. You have routes, like directions, access to road data, And also you have places, which is all the places that you see on Google Maps, which are from specific towns to cities to businesses to what have you, and all these pins that you see on Google Maps. So you have access to these. And you can find it in this link. I'm going to post a slide later and you can have them there. So some, or actually all of the Google Map platform APIs are these. You have the Map SDK for Android and iOS. You have the Maps JavaScript API, which we will see today. You have the Maps Static API, which you can generate static images of maps, of Google Maps to embed on your websites and customize them as you want. You have the Street View Static API, which provides you with 360-degree static imagery that you can use. You have the Maps URLs. That there are URLs actually that you can form URLs that will direct you to a specific place. You have the Maps Embed API if you want to just embed a map on your website. The Directions API, which is what it is. The Distance Matrix, where you can calculate real-world distances between places on Google Maps. The Roads API, okay, you know what the roads. I mean, there is all the roads and all the networks that contain roads on Earth. The Places SDK and the Places library for JavaScript, which is, again, gives you access to all the places that are on Google Maps. The Geocoding API, which translates either coordinates to addresses or addresses to coordinates. The Geolocation API, which if you enable, it gets access to your location where you are, shows you your blue dot on the screen, and you have access to things that are near you. And the Time Zone API, where you get, of course, the time zone that is in each place. What does the Google Maps JavaScript API come with? It comes with markers. Markers are the most obvious thing that you can imagine on a map. It also comes with a visualization library, where you can import data and visualize it on the map, and we'll see that today in more depth. The drawing library, where you can actually draw shapes and geometries on the map. The geometry library, which is necessary for computing distances on the map. It gives you like the actual distance on a sphere and things like that, or the actual shapes and how they're projected on a sphere. The Places library, and you can also get autocomplete for addresses, which is super cool. Of course, you can style and theme and customize your map however you want. So if you want to build the map that was presented in the previous presentation, you can actually do that if you choose the right colors and the right outlines and everything you want. And of course, brand it to your business needs. Then you have localization. So you know when you're in Spain, everything is in Spanish, or when I'm in Greece, everything is in Greek. You can actually choose what language to display your map in. You also have access to elevation data, so that would be super useful if you're creating an application for walking or for cycling, where you would know the change of elevation on each route. You have geocoding and directions, of course. And of course, you get access to a lot of user interactions and events that you can interact with and hook your application to. So how would you add this in Angular? So there are libraries out there who can add it for you. I think the most popular one is the Angular Google Maps, but I prefer to not use them. I like to do it like vanilla style. I mean, we have the great docs of the API, which are very extensive, full with examples and tutorials. We have types. I mean, we have the types of Google Maps that you can install in your application. And then the object is defined and recognized, and you have access to all the sub-objects that everything offers. And we also have Angular, of course, and the view child, and all the DOM interactions that, again, were presented in the previous presentation. So, I mean, what else do you need? So, how do you load the API? So, of course, the API is loaded with a script, and along with any libraries you need. I mean, there's not a package that you can install, it's just a script. And so normally, you just add the script in your index.html. And as you can see, if you want to add geometry, drawing, visualization, any libraries, you just add them as URL parameters. And usually, when we were adding scripts just with a script tag, we would add a callback. Here it would be the init tab. So the script defines a global variable object that is the map and all its functions, which is the Google map. And once your script is loaded and the global object is defined, normally you would be able to access it from anywhere in your app, like that. But that's not the case here, of course, because scripts usually load asynchronously, and they invoke a callback function when loaded. Here was the init map, as we said. So declaring a globally available function is not so straightforward here. Plus, we're usually targeting performance, so we wouldn't want to load something in the beginning if we're not going to use it or until we want to use it. So what do? OK, you make a script loading service. It's not the super neat thing to do. You just create a script tag manually with JavaScript, and you pass a callback function in it. And when you invoke it, you make sure that this function will go at the script, load it, and you know when it's loaded. And you can do this you have the service, you can do this in your component, and then you get a callback, and you can start initializing your map when the callback is invoked. So done. I mean, Google Maps is added to your app, piece of cake, ready to go, right? OK, no. So let's see. How do you know it's there, first of all? So first of all, you check if the Google object is available in the window and the Google Maps object is available in the window. If it is, just go ahead and draw the map. If not, load the script, as I explained in the previous step. You see, of course, that we are referencing the object with these notational brackets, because if we go ahead and try to reference it directly, the linter would complain. Google is not defined. Maps is not defined. So how do you actually add the map on your application? Where does it go? So the map has to go in a div, right? And the div has to have a specified height. So because if you just add a div there, it will have a height of 0, and the map will not appear. So it has to have a specified height. And you also give it a template reference variable. And let's see it in the component. So in the component, of course, you import the types that we said in the first step, the types Google Maps. Then you make an element, a reference to the map element. And then you have an object that is a Google Maps map object. And then you pass to it a new map. And let's see what we have here. Let me see if I have a pointer. OK. So as you can see here, the Google Maps object takes some parameters. So first of all, it takes the element where the map will go into. Then you specify a zoom. I think the zoom goes from 0 to 18, 0 being you're far out and you see the whole globe, 18 meaning, I don't know, you can see the most thing. Then you specify a center, which is a latitude, longitude Google Maps object. You specify if you want to use a scroll wheel, the pan control, Street View control, all the controllers that you usually see on a Google map. If you go to maps.google.com, you specify what you want. And you can also specify where you want your controls to be. So for example, I want my zoom controls to be large and their control position to be in the right bottom. And we'll see these positions as we move along. So the first thing that you want to do to a map is to pan or have a button that gets you to the center of your map and sets you to a zoom. So for example, if you're in your Android app and you click the little target button, it zooms right to where you are. It pans and zooms where you are. If you wanted to do that in the JavaScript API, you have methods like setCenter and setZoom that do it for you. So let's add data on it now. So as we said, so what is a map? A map is essentially a two-dimensional representation of a piece of the earth, right? It's just a representation. And it's enriched with two-dimensional representations of information about this piece of earth. Information about roads, rivers, shapes of the earth, building blocks, etc., to scale or not. Other data is businesses, or if you, I don't know, if you have election maps, there are data there of how many people voted for that person or the other. So maps are used actually to visualize data about the space they're showing. So a map of Madrid will show the name of Madrid, will show the roads. I mean, you get the image. So the first, so maps started like very long ago, and they started with like given representation. They were designed by explorers, and they were given representations of how the explorers perceived the Earth, of how it was. And for example, they drew some monsters in the sea because they never knew what was there, or they drew mountains and everything. So this evolved, and we have the maps as we know them today. Another example of maps is when visualizing like data. So Jon Snow, not the Jon Snow that was mentioned before. Jon Snow was I think he was a statistician and a doctor in 19th century in London. And one of the things he wanted to do was understand where the cholera of London started. So he started mapping with data about deaths. So this data about deaths gave him some information of where were clusters of deaths, so he could understand where the cholera started spreading from. So he just used maps and data to draw some conclusions. So what formats do we have of data? We have GeoJSON data, which is one of the most popular formats, which contain essentially data with coordinates, latitude and longitude coordinates, but also contain data of the shape they are describing. So for example, they say this is a polygon, and they contain all the information about the points of that polygon, and also contain metadata for each of these objects that they represent. So you can add any types of metadata there, and we're going to see that afterwards. You have JSON data, of course. You have CSV data, shape files, which are very popular, so KML and GML, which Google Maps works very well with, and more. So how do you visualize data? We said points is the most obvious thing that you visualize data with. Also polygons. I mean, countries are polygons, right? Points with values, or clusters also. So let's see how you visualize points with Google Maps. So we'll be working with two data sets, a CSV and a JSON, and both contain a lot of points. So the method one of visualizing points is markers. So the simplest way to add a marker on Google Maps is first you define it, because it's a new Google Maps marker. You add a position to it, latitude, longitude, an icon to it that you define, and we're going to see this afterwards. And usually you attach an info window to a marker. The info window is a thing when you press on a marker, it pops up and gives you information about it. And you set position, you set content, and you open it. And then you set it to the map. What happens if you have a lot of markers? You create a marker array, and then you loop through the array to add each of the markers in the map, obviously. But the problem is with a lot of markers usually and spatial data is that you end up in things like this. So this data set here, which we'll see afterwards in the live application as well, visualizes the telecommunication masts in the center of London. So as you can see, around here, which is the center, just above the city, you have a lot of telecommunication masts. Here you have less. But you cannot really draw a conclusion from here because this is just a mess, and you don't know how many there are there. So what do? You use clustering. Clustering is a very famous method, a very popular method of visualizing markers. So Google Maps offers you clustering. And what clustering does is it just clusters the bunches of here telephone masts together and tells you how many they are in each space, which is a lot more helpful, right? If you compare this with this, we can get a lot more information from that. And this is done with Google Maps, of course. So how do you do it? You define the marker cluster class, and then you say which map it is on, which markers you want to cluster. You give an image to its cluster, and then you set the grid size. And we'll see in a bit what the grid size does. So, okay, let's see now. So, wait. So this is the application I have created for today, which I'll send you the link. So as you saw here, if I say show masts, the maps appear like that. If I cluster them, they appear like that. And you can control the grid. And as you increase it, the clusters change. Or as you decrease it, the clusters become smaller. So you can control the size of the grid size of your clusters to make the most of your data. Yeah. Another method of visualizing points is heat maps. So what do heat maps do? If you have a huge data set of points and you want to visualize them on the map, at points in the map where there are a lot of data, you get darker colors. When there are less data, you get less colors. And let's see again how this works with Google Maps. So let's hide everything. So this here shows the number of houses to rent in London, and if you increase the heat map radius, you may understand how this works. If you increase the heat map radius, here you have a lot of rents, but the radius rents and the radius is large, so you get red. If you decrease the size, then they start to become individual points, right? And this is a Google map, and you can do it with Google Maps, which is super cool, because maybe you thought you needed a more sophisticated library to do it, but you don't. So what is the code? Again, you have the visualization library, you create a heat map layer, you add data to this heat map, and then you set a gradient, which you can customize and add whichever colors you want. For example, I have added the red and blue, but you can add whatever you want. You set the radius, which I changed from here, as you saw, and you set it to this map. That's simple. Now, let's see how displaying GeoJSON works. It's much, much simpler. So I have a GeoJSON which has areas. This is I think, in the outskirts of Manchester. And it has areas, and each of these areas are like, I think there are lower output areas. They're like neighborhoods that outer Manchester is divided into. And at the last census, they asked some questions about people who are over 65 and they're lonely, and there are more people who are 65 and they're lonely. They added the prevalence of loneliness, and it produced some numbers. And here we're visualizing this. So the GeoJSON that we have contains data of the outline of each of these areas, and it also gives us a number, the number of the prevalence. So we have a gradient again. We add this number to the gradient, and it gives us this yellow color or this darker color, and also the outline. So let's see how you do. OK, let's see it in action. Again, here, it looks very pretty, doesn't it? And if you click on it, you have an info window, and it tells you information. So again, let's see the code. It's simple as that. You just load GeoJSON, and you have the link to your GeoJSON. It's just an one-liner. And then you can add some controls to it. You can add a listener to your data, because the data library contains a listener, which is a mouse over and a mouse out. And you can also set styles to your data. For example, I'm setting the fill color and the stroke weight. What about the legends? So you see these legends appearing on the lower left. So this one important thing that we'll cover today. So this legend is it's just an HTML element. It's a paragraph, and it has some styles. And let's see how we're adding it on the map on the next step. So first of all, you can go to this link, because this is where the website is, and take a look as I'm talking, and I'll show the link again. ngGmapCat. OK. So let's take a look at this site, or open it on your phones and take a look. OK. So it has some buttons that zooms in London or in Manchester. It has, we're turning the lights on, we're turning the lights off. We're showing the rents or the clusters, and we can draw some shapes on it. So what was all that? What more do we see here? We see a custom theme. It's dark, right? And I just tweaked some colors and made this theme because I like dark colors. It has some custom controls, so you don't see your usual Google Maps controls. I have added these buttons here. I have added some links to my website. I have added these nice buttons here that help you create things. And the zoom controls we saw in the beginning, which are large, are at the right bottom. We also saw some drawing, right? I drew some shapes on the map. And also you see this save button here. What I drew, I can just export it. So let's see about customizations first. First, you have the map style. And if we have time in the end, I'll tweak some colors and we'll see it changing, and it's so fun. So you can declare a styled map type, and you can add a name and a color to it. You add a name and a handler to it, and so the dark map here takes this color, and you set the map ID. What I did here also is, let me see the code. I have created this, which we'll see afterwards if we have time. I have created a JSON which contains element types and geometries and the relevant colors. And you pass this into your styled map. So here, this styled map passes in the styled map type. So whenever we want to switch to dark map, it takes these colors from here and shows us this. Also, controls. So how do we display controls on the map? I guess we all know CSS, right? We could just have some divs and absolute position them, and maybe it would be a mess. Okay, let's be honest. So what do? You have your map div, and then you have as many divs as you want in your template, and you get the element references of them, and then you can add them to map controls. So map controls is sort of an array which contains any control that you want to appear on the map. And in the map controls, you can use the control position that you have and decide where each place goes and just add the element reference there. So as you can see at the left top, I have my buttons here. At the left bottom, I have my legend, as we saw before. At the top right, I have my drawing controls, which are here. And at the bottom left, I just have my link to my website. So using these controls, you can just properly add all these controls on your map, and they will appear there. No weird CSS, nothing. So let's see about the drawing. So you just added as URL parameter, as we said in the beginning, just libraries, which you can comma separate and add them. And it gives you access to the following class, the drawing manager. So how do you initialize the drawing manager? Again, google.maps.drawing.drawing manager, and you also want a drawing layer. I'll explain why. So first, you have the drawing manager, and drawing mode, you don't want to initialize it with any mode. And I don't want the default controls because they don't look very nice, and they're very small buttons. I created my own controls because I like them more, and I have a cat icon as well. So you just set the drawing manager on the map, and you initiate a drawing layer. So Google Maps has layers. And whenever you add an overlay to the map, and an overlay to the map means this here, or the masts if I show them, or the GeoJSON that we created here, or all these nice drawings that I'm drawing. Or these are overlays. And all these overlays are added to the default data layer of the map. But if I ever plan to create something nice here and want to save it and export it, if I just went and said export data, it would export a huge file which would contain all the data which is as an overlay on the map. So what do? I create a new layer, and I add all my drawings on that layer. So what tools do I get? I get a circle, a marker, a polygon, a polyline, and a rectangle, which are all here in this class, the overlay type. So using that set of tools, you can customize them and create your own controls, as I have here. So for a marker, you just set drawing mode to marker. You add a custom icon to it like this. You give it a custom size. You set the options that you want it to be a point. You want it to be clickable and draggable. So I can drag this marker around or this around. Again, the cat marker that I just saw, it's also a marker, but I added a new icon to it. Or the polygon that I created. I think this is defined as a polygon. I just gave it a custom fill color, the opacity, and everything. So I can really customize my tools and have whatever I want. You can, I don't know, you can build them as paints if you want, I guess. So how do I stop? How do I exit drawing mode? By clicking this hand here, you set drawing mode to null. So how do you display the drawings on the map? Again, Maps has, as I said, it has event listeners. So whenever an overlay is completed, so whenever I complete creating an overlay, I just add it to the map. Like map add data, and you add it to the map. And I'm also adding it to the drawing layer. Why am I adding it to the drawing layer? Because what if I want to save and export my creation? I go to drawing layer, I say to GeoJSON, and it gets all my data, and it creates a GeoJSON out of it with information about location, color, and what have you. And you just download it however you want this method to work. So now you try it. Just go to this and play around. And if you go there and play around, there's also the links to the slides, and there's also the links to the code, which you can fork. So there's always more, of course. There are more features coming to Google Maps. We just brushed the surface now, and so that the simplest things you can do with the Google Maps JavaScript API. If you're really into data visualization, DeckGL, which is an awesome data visualization library, I think built by Uber, has now integration with Google Maps for cool visuals, so check it out. Each one of these is links, which are cool. And you can do just about everything you might think of with Google Maps, really. So stay tuned and find me and ask me. I don't know how much time I have left. OK. OK, before I say stay tuned, go. So in order to start with, OK, I have 5 minutes. OK, so I have just 5 minutes to tell you that, of course, when you want to use Google Cloud services like the Google Maps platform, you get an API key. And right now, the app you're using with my map has an API key. They're my API key. Right now, I don't have it protected. And I'm going to protect it after I finish this call. So Google Maps platform, you get an API key, and you can add restrictions to it. And you can add specific HTTP addresses and restrict addresses to specific APIs. Because now you could go ahead and use my API key, and I don't know, use my application all the time, and I would get billed. Because also Google Maps comes with pricing. If you're within reasonable limits, you won't get charged. But if you have a commercial application with millions of hits, then you will get charged. So mind your quota, I guess. So stay tuned and find me and ask me. I'll be around all day today. And also, if you're super interested in creating nice things with Google Maps, I give a training in 1 month organized by my awesome company, ThisDot. And the link is here, so you can do it. And thanks. Reach out to me. Follow me on Twitter. This is my website. This is the code, the demo, and the slides. Take a picture. I'll post it on Twitter as well. I mean, if you just follow me on Twitter, I'll post everything there. And yeah, thank you.